Hi, my name's Phil, and welcome to A Different Bias. This is a channel where I basically discuss things that are on my mind, politically speaking. And what I was going to talk today, I'm sort of a Labour supporter, so left-wing, politically. And I was going to talk about what it is about conservative values that I could never possibly support, having read an article from someone who's a member of the Conservative Party, not Boris Johnson, more moderate. But then as I was, going through it and thinking what I was going to say, and I'll just probably do that at some point in the next few days, I was actually going through and thinking, well, there's a lot of issues that this person writing about their own party has. It was all about the Islamophobia at the moment. This is a Muslim Conservative Party member and indeed councillor, so someone very active in the party. And I was thinking, so they're looking at these issues within their party, and I'm thinking, interestingly, we have the same issues or similar issues in the Labour Party, and maybe sometimes from a particular vantage point you think it's a party issue. Well, maybe it's more of a society issue. So there's a few quotes I'm going to pull out from this article here. But I mean, at the moment, you could look at it at the moment and look at, say, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, the two biggest political parties in the UK, and say that they both have an issue, a similar issue in many ways. For the Conservative Party, there's a huge Islamophobia issue. For the Labour Party, there's a very problematic anti-Semitism issue going on. And that's not obviously to say that people in Labour are hugely anti-Semitic, or even that there's large numbers of people that are. And the same in the Conservative Party. It doesn't mean to say that the Conservative Party is awash with Islamophobes. Again, it could be quite a small number, but nonetheless, it's causing a headache for each of those parties. So reading what this Conservative councillor was saying, the first thing well, not the first thing they said, but the first quote I'm going to sort of give over here, they were saying, the vast majority of Conservatives are, of course, entirely decent people, but the party has troublemakers, and these often come to light when discussing issues of race and religion. Now, there's a couple of things in there. I mean, this is perfectly true. I know that when some people, when you hear you're a Labour supporter, and if they're not, if they're a conservative or just a right-wing, politically, they just think, oh, well, that's that then. Because they'll see a lot of people, especially if they label themselves socialists, which I certainly do, as being very hateful towards the right. And then that's what a lot of people are like. They'll say, oh, we hate the Conservatives, which is not only ridiculous but stupid. It's stupid because you're saying you hate the majority of people in the country. Well, how do you ever expect to get into power? But the other thing is, it is ridiculous, and I think it's born from being living in an echo chamber, never actually going out and meeting or talking to people who have different views. Because there are some people who will introduce themselves, they find out that you're politically very different, and says, well, that's it, we can't be friends, which is absolutely madness. And I think that's what causes a lot of the Islamophobia as well. I had a comment on my Brexit video, which just seems to have blown up for some reason. Don't know why. But nonetheless, there was someone in the comments, there was a lot of comments there, and I have read most of them. There was an awful lot of comments. And one of them was saying, that the leaver, Brexit leaver, and they, but for political reasons, and those are the sort of things I can understand. I can understand someone accepting, well, okay, economically it's not going to be great for a while, but politically I just think it's important. I don't, and some people are going, I don't want the closer political harmony with Europe. Okay, fine. But this person, it wasn't that. What they were saying is, well, they were basically saying the choice is economically weaker or we turn into a Muslim nation. It's like, how does that thought ever get into anyone's head? And it's because they read the Daily Mail or something. And it is ridiculous. And it's not possible, it's actually not possible to hold that view if you know Muslims. Simple as that in this country. So it must be that this person and people like them do not know any Muslims. They don't associate with them or anything like that, which means... And this is, of course, how racial division and division in society generally takes hold anyway. Obviously, we always go back to the rise of the Nazis, which is it's a tired old trope to go to when you're trying to compare anything in the modern times. Oh, just like the rise of the Nazis. But unfortunately, It is just like that. And what you do is you start to get people in society to see other people in society as being very different. And it's a lot easier to do that if you don't, associate with them. Whereas I do, and I see British Muslims. I'm a teacher. I have students, and they don't segregate themselves off. They're just the same as any other students. They talk about the same things. They behave in the same way. They're just British teenagers, and the adults are British adults, and it's very similar. And you sometimes have little cultural differences, but you have cultural differences between where I come from in South Yorkshire and people in London, or people in Hertfordshire, or Oxfordshire, or Glasgow, and so it's absolute maddening. And if these people were in your circle of friends or social circle, you would never entertain that thought. It's absolute nonsense. But yeah, so the other point there I'm trying to make is, so if someone introduces themselves as a Conservative supporter, I don't automatically think that there's anything dishonest or bad about them. It's a viewpoint that I cannot possibly hold, because I think Conservative Party values are ultimately selfish, but that's a topic for another video. But I don't think any worse of a person if they just say that. That just means they've got a different opinion to me. Well, people who are Labour supporters have different opinions to me. You get any two people with their own brain and their own thoughts in a room, and they can agree for 2 hours when they're talking about stuff, and then eventually you'll come to something where you disagree anyway. But the issue about where it says but the party has troublemakers, as indeed all do, and these often come to light when discussing issues of race and religion. And of course it's obvious, and the reason is because if you're going to have a sensible debate on anything like that, then you've got to do it in a very sensitive way. And I'll just come to another quote before I expand on that. So it says, "It is something that perhaps was always there in some form," so speaking about Islamophobia in the Conservative Party, "but it has undoubtedly become worse since the Brexit vote in 2016. And yeah, we know that, verbal and physical attacks on people who are seen as minorities or seen as outsiders, even when they're not, increase in wake of Brexit. And the reason for this is because people, apart from anything else, it was like, a very small minority, but still, a significant number of the country voted for Brexit. And the problem with that is the extreme racists who voted for Brexit assumed that everyone else who voted for Brexit voted for that same reason, because that's the problem you always have. Everyone saying, oh, people who voted for Brexit voted for this reason. And they keep banging on about it. They keep banging on about it in the comments to my videos, as if it's going to change anything. And so from their point of view, it's like, well, the whole country now agrees with me that these people shouldn't be in the country, and therefore they felt justified in stepping up those attacks, because they always felt like that. They just always also felt that society was saying to them, you can't behave like that, which is still true. Society still says to those people, you can't behave, but they don't think that anymore. And that's why we've seen some clips of videos going onto YouTube of someone on public transport, for example, abusing the hell out of someone because they're black or Asian. And these things have been on the increase. And indeed, since Boris Johnson's article, lo and behold, there has been an increase in hate crime against Muslims in this country, in particular women. And it's because if you're going to discuss certain things that run the risk of allowing nutters to believe that it's justifying their hateful behaviour, you have to deal with it sensitively, and you have to keep making it clear that, these are people, because that is the problem. If you've got groups of people in the country who don't associate with another particular group of people, they don't see, or it's easy to not see them as real people with real feelings that you are hurting, because you never have to face up to the consequences. There's an image here, political cartoon, which it's based on like the situation in America, but it could easily be in this country, and this is the problem. You can have the vast majority of the country who are preaching love and tolerance, but what the media presents to us is the sensational stories, and hatred and bigotry are sensational because they incite strong opinions. And people will read articles on them, whether or not they agree. The ones who agree are going, yeah, this justifies my thoughts. And the ones who disagree read it because of their outrage. Whereas someone preaching tolerance, not especially interesting, unfortunately, is the case. But it is, but the issue is it's in the rise. This person has noted that in the Conservative Party, this is in the rise. They've said, as a Muslim party member themselves, I have been active in Conservative politics with other councillors, so clearly they have been, for more than 8 years, and in all that time I never had any bad feeling directed towards me because of my religion. Now note there, they're not saying that they've personally experienced things increasing. They said they've never had any bias shown towards them, or at least aggression because of that within the party, whereas now it's happening. And as I say, I can imagine in the Conservative Party, if you're a Conservative Party member, you're thinking to yourself, especially if you're Muslim, where it's going to be super obvious, because if you're not a Muslim, you would only notice it if it was pointed out to you. Maybe you know Muslims who are saying that this is happening to you. And if you don't, it's easy to believe there's an issue at all. And I think the Conservative Party maybe does have a bigger problem, because ultimately it's the only party on the right, which means that all the right-wing racists inevitably gravitate towards it, in a way, because there are left-wing racists as well, but they don't always necessarily gravitate towards Labour, say. I mean, for a couple of reasons, I think. One is there are other parties where they can spread themselves out a little bit. But I think the other reason is as well is the Conservative Party is almost all the time in power, whereas with Labour are not that often, which also means they can, if you are on the, if you have extreme views, you might just join a fringe party, because why join a larger party? Because it's not like they're going to get in power very often anyway. Every now and then they do, and not very often. So maybe that dilutes it a little bit more in the Labour Party than the Conservative Party. I don't know. But what I do see is I see the issues that they're talking about here in the Conservative Party, and I see the anti-Semitism, because, the vast majority of Labour, I've never experienced any anti-Semitism in Labour myself. I'm not as active as this person in the party, in my own party compared to theirs. And I think the only reason it's blown up recently, and I think this is similar as well, is I've said before, because Jeremy Corbyn, where in the small, tiny number of instances where it's been an issue, it hasn't been dealt with properly. And now he's been boxed into a corner where, they're wanting him to accept the full, internationally accepted definition of anti-Semitism, which runs the risk, that's the problem with it, runs the risk of not being allowed to criticise Israel as a state in terms of its state actions. And the same thing in the Conservative Party. You've got issues of Islamophobia at the top level and the current Tory leadership. And no one accuses the Theresa May of being an Islamophobe. But it's not been dealt with, properly. I mean, they say there's an investigation going on. No one seriously believes that anything's going to come of it, other than the Conservative Party gets to say, we don't agree with these comments, but ultimately free speech. And it's the same in the Labour Party, because that's what they've tried to do. And they've got themselves into a right old mess. And I think that's what this person's worried about. Maybe I don't know whether they've looked at Labour, because they haven't said anything about that. But I would look at Labour and say, well, they had investigations, but ultimately allowed people that were close or powerful within the party to basically get away with stuff. And if the same thing happens there. But I actually do wonder if it's not a party issue as much, even though the parties should do better at dealing with it. Is it a society issue just because we ostracise ourselves from groups that we don't want to associate with? And is there amongst a small number of people a bit of a culture of fear? And then it feeds into itself, because, as I say, those stories then get into the media because they're more sensational, and you get the impression that it's more widespread than it really is, and therefore it becomes more widespread. It's a bit like the fear, parents these days often being afraid to leave their children unattended. I mean, when I was young, I used to go out and play all day during summer. There's a lot of parents who wouldn't allow their children to do that now. Or they might get snatched or dragged into woods or something like that. Not because it's more prevalent these days than it used to be, but because, you know, it's more in your face because of 24-hour media, and these stories rise to prominence very, very quickly. And I wonder if society ultimately has these views because it refuses to engage and it refuses to go out and see people as people. They'll see them as different, and you know, read the hype in the papers and the fear mongering and believe it to be true, without actually going and meeting people and finding out that they're actually, do you know what, just like you. And maybe that scares the hell out of some people as well. Maybe it would scare the hell out of people to go to a group, a social group where there's a lot of Muslims, for example, and find out that actually what they like to talk about is the test or the football. The Premier League just started, you know, or the sharing baking recipes or something like that, and basically behaving as any other British community does. And maybe that just scares them. I don't know. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below, because I think this is definitely one of those issues where it's very difficult to get a really good vantage point, because we're all, and this is ultimately the point of the channel, the reason why I called it A Different Bias, we're all from our own vantage point looking at everything else, and sometimes from another vantage point you can sort of see that what appears to be a localized problem actually isn't, or what appears to be a more widespread problem is actually more localized. Who knows? But anyway, thanks for listening if you've got this far. Twitter is down below, by the way. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I have a separate Twitter just sort of for, again, political type stuff. And thanks very much, and until next time, I will see you later.